Well, I'm just going to introduce you. Welcome back, everybody. And next presentation is Alec Mckenzie, who's a Master of Research student, also in the Health and Human Sciences School. So over to you, Alec.
Thank you, Shay. Thanks everyone for coming. Sorry, I'm a bit underprepared for today, as I like to. My in-candidature review got moved 2 months earlier, so we had 3 weeks to prepare for that. So unfortunately, this had to go on the back burner a bit. And I'm actually currently up the Gold Coast to see a surgeon. I broke my arm a few weeks ago, so I got an appointment with him, so that's why I don't have a webcam. So sorry for all that straight off the bat. Well, I thought I'd use today as an opportunity to advertise my study. So I'm calling for participants. Do you dip? I'm actually doing 2 studies as part of my master's. First one is to analyze and compare. The aim is to analyze and compare the joint angles or kinematics and the muscle activation patterns of the 3 most common dip variations. These are the bench dip, the bar dip, and the ring dip. And study 2, exact same, except we're comparing the bar dip under 2 conditions. These are fresh or non-fatigued and fatigued. Why are we doing this? It's because any movement that's done by intermediate, beginner, and advanced exercisers all over the world deserves scientific attention. Any movement where practitioners are concerned with the supposed high injury risk deserves scientific attention. And here's the dip in the middle, done every day around the world by all different levels of athletes. Practitioners are crying out for research because they think that there's a high risk of injury, yet the dip is yet to be systematically investigated. The major concerns for the dip are pec major muscle strains. So that's your big muscle over your breastbone. And there's actually an example, the 2015 CrossFit Regionals event.
The next official event is just after lunch, the Study Slam and animation.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, the 2015 CrossFit Regionals event, it was snatches and ring dips, and actually over 10% of the male athletes reported a rupture or a strain of their pec major throughout this event. The other and perhaps more significant risk of injury is to the anterior shoulder. Now this is your shoulder capsule or your glenohumeral capsule, and it's the bottom part here, this specific ligament that gets stressed and strained when you're in an extended position, particularly when done repetitively. And if you stretch this ligament by just 0.8 millimeters, you can see permanent elongation, which leads to anterior shoulder instability, or a loose or a wobbly shoulder, it's also called. So for my laboratory, I get to use some pretty cool equipment, luckily enough. I'm actually using 15 three-dimensional cameras. People keep trying to cut me off.
Excuse me a minute. Gurmeet, can you please mute your microphone?
No, it's all good. Yeah, so I get to use some cool equipment. Get 15 three-dimensional cameras. These cost about $15,000 each, so some expensive equipment as well. And they're set up around our central rig. You can see here is where we put the bench. You can see the ring dip actually attached here, and you can see the bar dip attached here, and the rings hang from the ceiling, or hang from the pole at the top. You might have seen in the movies, in animation, they put these little dots all over their actors. We use the exact same system here. So these dots map you in live in a 3-dimensional space, and they calculate exact joint angles. So the participants I'm looking for is males specifically, who are free from injury to the shoulder, upper limb, and trunk, and who regularly incorporate the ring dip specifically. Now that's a very important one. Anyone puts their hand up, says, yeah, I can do the bar dip, but I'll show you what happens. Here's our record holder for doing the most bar dips. He was able to do 38 bodyweight bar dips. And here's him trying to do some ring dips. So he's done 1. You need to do 4 for my study. And you can see he failed at 3. So that's why it's so important for my study. You need to have regular experience in the ring dip. For my protocol, here's just a quick time lapse. You can see we marker up the participant with all those little dots as you've seen in animation. Then we put some electrodes on to measure the muscle activations. This participant chose to take his pants off. We don't require you to do that. He just likes it. We do some quick calibrations to set the camera, set the algorithm properly. And then you just got to do four reps in each dip condition. And then followed by that, you do one maximum set so we can get a fresh and a fatigued, a few fresh and fatigued repetitions. So here it is. Oh, my videos are freaking out a little bit, but here's the live tracking, and you can see him. You can see him do the video struggling, but you can see him do 4 reps while we measure his joint angles, as you can see on the right there, and muscle activation patterns. So just like Vaney just showed you, we get a bunch of these squiggly lines that don't mean a lot. We apply this algorithm, which again doesn't mean a lot, but we eventually end with something pretty usable and will be very helpful for practitioners. So here's an example for my study 1. I'm looking at one muscle, so triceps. Most people might know these as tricep dips. On the x-axis, we got percentage of the dip repetition. So these dotted lines are the bottom position, the lowest point, and we got our muscle activation on the y-axis. If you look at the bench, this is the easiest progression. You can see we get this pretty steady increase of activation through the bottom position. When we're midway up the movement, then we start to plateau and taper off to the top of the movement. And then our bar and our ring dip, they follow a fairly similar pattern. They both have this have an increase throughout the down phase when we're coming down the movement to the bottom position, a little bit of a decrease near the bottom position, and a big spike when we're trying to accelerate and get up from that bottom position. The anterior deltoid, this is the muscle straight on the front of your shoulder, another one that people try and train specifically with this movement. And you can see in the bench dip, it's not targeted effectively at all. So if you're trying to build that shoulder muscle, you don't want to be doing bench dips. You can see our bar dip and our ring dip follow a very similar pattern. It's just our ring dip, has a slightly increased activation, which is what you'd expect because it's a harder progression. And finally, our pec major. This is the third muscle that you specifically target while doing this exercise. And again, it's not effectively targeted in the bench dip variation. For the bar dip, we activate it quite significantly, almost as much during the ring dip. However, you can see in the ring dip, it's more heavily activated throughout the entire movement, rather than just the peak to get us up out of the bottom position. And here's our kinematic. So this is our joint angles for each variation. Now don't worry about trying to interpret all this. I think the main key points are where the bottom position occurs. So on the bench dip, the bottom position occurs just before 60%. And the bar dip, it occurs a little bit later. That's because the participant's really able to slowly control themselves eccentrically or when they're going down, and then boom, quick explode up to the top of the movement. And again, you can't do that on the ring, because if you do that on the ring, you just wobble out and fall over. So you got to slowly control yourself down and slowly control yourself up. Apart from that, all the joint angles are very similar. This participant, the main difference is his thorax flexion. So you can see this blue line. He's actually leaning backwards on the bench dip, which isn't typical. However, he leans forward on the bar and the ring dip, which is more typical. So I'll leave you with that. If you know anyone who does the ring dip, I'm in Lismore. Love to have you. I need 5 more participants. I've been collecting data since March with a 6-month hiatus due to COVID. So yeah, get into contact with me. I really appreciate it. Thanks everyone for the time.
Thank you so much, Alec. I'm sorry to tell you that my ring dipping days are well over. So I'm not going to be against to you, but I think it's absolutely fascinating research, because I've been someone who does go to the gym and likes to work out, and as I've gotten older, and particularly as a woman too, I found that if practitioners don't understand the injuries that can occur, it can be a very serious problem, and it can be a very serious long-term problem for people. So well done on your research, because any amount of information that people have is really an improvement. So good on you. That's absolutely wonderful.
Thank you.
I believe Richard has a question, and I just wanted to say also, well done for even presenting, considering all of those other things that were going on for you. That's just amazing, with your other presentation being brought forward 3 weeks and only having 3 weeks to get ready. So congratulations on everything that you're doing. That's just wonderful.
Oh, thank you, Shay. Thank you.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it really is. So Richard has a problem. Richard, would you like to put your mic and perhaps your video on and ask a question of Alec directly?
Yes. Hi, Shay. Hi, Alec. You've really taken me by surprise there with the video, so I don't have good lighting here, I'm afraid. But Alec, first I just wanted to say best wishes for a swift recovery. I don't know a lot about the area of your research, but just recently, as it happens, I've heard quite a lot about a condition referred to as frozen shoulder. Does your research have any impact on this condition, which seems to affect quite a lot of people, and I think probably middle-aged women in particular?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, frozen shoulder. Luckily, I've just looked into that last month. It's a really weird condition. Yeah, it affects middle-aged women the most. But so it's called adhesive capsulitis. For people who don't know, it's typically you just get your shoulder frozen. You can't move it effectively. But what they find is when you put someone under anesthesia, they can move it normally. So it's not really a well understood condition, but no, my research does not really affect that too much. Mine's more, instability. So if you constantly, like lots of people I'm sure, can constantly dislocate their shoulder, where we suspect, and we just got a paper published actually, that suspect that the ring dip, any dip variation could contribute to the instability of the shoulder joint. So yeah, not so much frozen shoulder, but yeah, more dislocations, subluxations, and yeah, pec major muscle strains.
Yeah, it's a condition that exactly as you've just described. I know somebody has kind of been diagnosed with it, but the suggestion was we don't really know why you have it, and it could be mental and it could be physiological, but we just don't really know. So it seems like there's a real opportunity for research in that area.
Yeah, that's exactly right. There's actually someone doing his PhD currently at Bond University investigating that. So that's how I stumbled across it. Right,
great. Excellent. Well done with your research.
Thank you.
I have a question, if nobody else has a question at this point. I'd like to ask you, what are your goals after you've completed your Masters, Alec, and where to from here for you when you finish?
Yeah, so my goal, I was supposed to be submitting around this time, but yeah, I had 6 months off due to the university not allowing data collection on human participants. So essentially I've got 11 months to finish, and hopefully I'll be able to finish in time for RTP scholarship offers next September. So yeah, I'd want to go further into shoulder research, more so prehabilitation and rehabilitation.
Yeah, well done. We've just got a question from Tilinka. She's asked you about the challenges that you faced in undertaking your research. You've mentioned COVID, which has interrupted your data collection. Is there anything else that you could comment on?
Yep. Well, I'm really struggling to find participants. I thought, because when I was doing it, I'm like, whoa, this is the coolest thing ever. So I'm like, I'll have people lining up out the front door. But that's not quite the case. So yeah, I'm just really having to spend some time in the recruitment. Yeah, just going to gyms and saying, hey, can you participate on this time? Otherwise people, you know, it's quite timely. It's an hour out of your day. So yeah, that's probably the biggest issue. The other biggest issue, like most of us probably face, is just getting your head around the statistics and the numbers. Like Raynon showed us in the last, we get thousands and thousands of rows of numbers. So we need to all come to terms with what they mean. And that's probably the second one of the more significant challenges.
Yes, I thought that when you were showing the slide of your data, and thought I hope that you have appropriate software and algorithms and all of the things that you need to crunch all that data and do something with it. That's a lot of information.
Yeah, so luckily my brother is a mechanical engineer, so he's helped me automate some spreadsheets, which has saved me hours upon hours. But yeah.
Oh, bless you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And your animations are particularly fascinating.
Yeah, I got some cool videos out of it for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if we don't have any more questions, does anyone have anything else they'd like to ask, or we'll finish this session for the morning?
Can I ask a question, Shay?
Please, Leslie.
Alec, how do you know where to put those special dots or little, what do you call it?
Yeah, they're called retro-reflective markers, yeah. I'll just share my screen again.
Retro-reflective markers. How do you know where you're supposed to place them?
Yeah, so there's some that are on anatomical landmarks. Like you see the one here in the middle of the chest. So you just have to palpate and find bony landmarks. For these cluster ones, these three, they don't actually matter too much. You get them to do some functional calibrations, functional ranges of motion, and the system actually determines exactly where the joint center is relative to these markers. So if you misplace it, it doesn't matter because the system will calibrate it and put it in. It's all relative to wherever you place it. But for these electrodes, they're the hardest ones. You got to wipe all the dead skin off, shave all the hair off, clean with alcohol, and you've got to place them parallel with the muscle fibers. So that's probably the more significant, the hardest part, these little electrodes to measure the muscle activations.
Yeah, you can see that it would take a lot of your time just setting that up with your participant. No,
Yeah,
it's very,
especially with
very cool.
The COVID rules now, I have to wear gloves, which, your gloves because it's all on sticky tape. So your gloves stick to the sticky tape, and you got to cut the ends of your gloves off so you can, it's a good challenge, good fun. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad after COVID you were able to start up as soon as possible, even with those measures in place, And it looks like a great program for you, Alec.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your questions, and thank you, Alec, for your success in sharing your research with us today. And I hope you get some participants out of it. And these recordings are available, so you can always send people to have a look at them or look at the recording yourself and use it in other ways.